The first time my new neighbors threatened to sue me over a tree, I honestly laughed. Not because it was funny, but because the whole thing sounded so ridiculous I thought it had to be some kind of misunderstanding. I mean, who goes to war over a tree? Especially a tree that had been standing there longer than either of our houses, longer than the paved roads in our neighborhood, probably longer than half the town itself. But then I saw the look on Ethan Calloway's face, and I realized this guy wasn't joking at all. He wanted that tree gone, and he didn't care what it cost me to make it happen. What he didn't know was that trying to cut corners around a 100-year-old oak was about to become the most expensive mistake of his life. I live in a little neighborhood outside Asheville, North Carolina, the kind of place where people still wave when they drive by, and where every street looks like it belongs on an old postcard. Most of the houses were built sometime in the 50s or 60s, modest brick homes with deep porches and giant trees arching over the roads like green tunnels. 12 years ago, after my divorce, I bought this small Cape Cod on the corner of Maple and Briarwood because I needed somewhere quiet to start over. Truth is, I wasn't doing great back then. My marriage had collapsed slowly and painfully. My dad had passed away the year before, and I remember walking into that front yard for the first time feeling completely exhausted with life. Then I saw the oak. It sat right near the curb, huge and sprawling, branches stretching halfway across the lawn like it owned the place. The trunk was so wide I probably couldn't wrap my arms halfway around it. There was this little brass plaque near the base from some old city preservation program identifying it as a heritage white oak estimated to be around 115 years old. I know this sounds corny, but standing under that tree felt calming, like the world slowed down for a second. My dad used to love trees like that. He worked as a park ranger most of his life and could identify almost anything growing in the woods just from the bark. When I was a kid, he'd stop on hikes every 5 minutes to point out old-growth trees like they were celebrities. So yeah, maybe I got sentimental about that oak. Maybe I cared more about it than most people would. But after everything that happened in my life, that tree became weirdly personal to me. It felt permanent in a time when nothing else did. For years, life on that corner was peaceful. The empty lot next door stayed untouched except for wildflowers and deer cutting through at night. Then about 2 summers ago, the lot sold. That's when Ethan and Vanessa Calloway showed up. Now look, I try not to judge people too fast, but some folks walk into a neighborhood acting like they're already annoyed to be there. That was Ethan. He drove this black Tesla that somehow always looked angry, and every conversation with him felt like a performance review at work. Vanessa wasn't rude exactly, just cold, like she smiled because she knew she was supposed to. At first, everything seemed normal enough. They told everyone they were building their dream home, and for a while the neighborhood was excited. But once construction started, people began noticing things. Trucks blocking driveways for hours. Workers leaving trash blowing across the street. Loud equipment running before sunrise. Then there was the actual house itself. Massive, modern, all sharp angles and gray concrete shoved awkwardly between these cozy older homes like someone dropped a tech office into a Hallmark movie. And Ethan, man, that guy cut corners every chance he got. I'm not even saying that to be petty. The contractor he hired, this tired-looking older guy named Luis, actually warned me one afternoon while we were both standing outside watching the crew pour part of the driveway foundation. He lowered his voice and said, "Your neighbor keeps changing plans because he thinks he can save money. That usually ends bad." At the time, I just laughed and said, "Well, not my circus." Turns out, it absolutely became my circus. About 3 weeks later, Ethan walked up my driveway carrying a clipboard and a folder full of papers like he was serving me court documents already. No hello, no small talk, just straight into business. "Your tree roots are interfering with our driveway excavation," he said flatly. "We're removing them tomorrow morning." I remember staring at him for a second because I genuinely thought I misheard him. "You're doing what?" He flipped the clipboard around and showed me these photos from the trench line near the property edge. Thick roots, really thick roots, stretched underneath where his concrete driveway was supposed to go. And right then, my stomach dropped. Because even I knew enough from my dad to understand those weren't random surface roots. Those were structural roots. And if somebody hacked through them carelessly, that oak might not survive it. I tried to stay calm at first. Honestly, I really did. I told Ethan there had to be another option. Maybe shift the driveway a few feet, maybe curve it around the root zone a little. I even pointed toward the street and said, "You've got plenty of room here." But the second I suggested redesigning anything, this guy's whole expression changed like I'd personally insulted him. "That would cost more," he snapped. There it was. Not safety, not property damage, not engineering. Money. I remember folding my arms and looking back toward the trench. "Those roots are probably keeping that tree alive." Ethan shrugged. "They're on my property." The way he said it bothered me more than I expected. Cold. Final. Like once a thing crossed a property line, it stopped matching. I said, "You cut roots that size, you could destabilize the whole tree." And this man actually laughed. "Well, then maybe the city should have cut it down 50 years ago." Then he turned around and walked off before I could even answer. That night, I barely slept. I kept staring out the front window at that oak swaying under the streetlight. And maybe this sounds dramatic, but it honestly felt like somebody had threatened a family member. Around midnight, I started researching local ordinances online, digging through city PDFs and preservation documents like a crazy person. That's when I found it. Heritage Tree Protection Ordinance. Turns out trees above a certain age and trunk diameter had legal protections in Asheville, especially white oaks. Any excavation or root removal within a protected radius required permits, certified arborist supervision, and city approval. Unauthorized damage could trigger major fines. I sat there staring at the screen for a good 10 seconds thinking, "Oh, Ethan is going to hate this." Next morning around 7:30, I heard machinery outside. I walked out with coffee in one hand and my phone in the other and saw two workers unloading cutting equipment beside the trench. No permits displayed. No arborist. Nothing. So I called the city. And I swear the timing couldn't have been more perfect if it happened in a movie. About 40 minutes later, just as one worker lowered a saw toward one of the exposed roots, this little white city inspection truck rolled up beside the curb. Out stepped a woman in a neon vest carrying a clipboard. The guy with the saw literally froze. She introduced herself as Dana Mercer from Urban Forestry Services and immediately started asking questions Ethan clearly wasn't prepared for. "Where's your permit?" Silence. "Who's the supervising arborist?" More silence. Then she measured the trunk of the oak, circled the excavation site twice, took photos, and finally looked at Ethan over her glasses like a disappointed principal. "You cannot touch these roots without city authorization." I thought Ethan's head might actually explode. "You've got to be kidding me," he barked. "This tree is damaging my property." Dana didn't even flinch. "Then you should have accounted for that before construction." Oof. Even the workers looked uncomfortable after that. Ethan turned toward me standing in my yard and pointed like I'd orchestrated the whole thing. "This is because of you." And honestly, maybe I shouldn't have smiled, but I did. Just a little. I said, "I didn't make the rules." That's when the real war started. Over the next few weeks, the atmosphere in the neighborhood got weird. Ethan stopped pretending to be friendly altogether. Vanessa avoided eye contact completely. Construction slowed down because the driveway couldn't move forward without approval, and every time I stepped outside, I could practically feel Ethan glaring through the windows of their half-finished house. Then one afternoon, he marched across the lawn holding a stapled packet. "We hired an arborist," he announced. The way he said arborist sounded sarcastic, like the profession itself offended him. I took the report and immediately knew something felt off. It was barely 4 pages long. No detailed measurements. No soil analysis. Half the photos were blurry cell phone pictures. The conclusion basically boiled down to root removal acceptable with minimal risk. Minimal risk. For a 100-year-old heritage oak. I may not be an expert, but even I knew that smelled like nonsense. So I called someone else. That's how Dr. Eleanor Reeves entered this story. Now Eleanor was probably in her 60s, sharp as a tack, silver hair pulled back in a bun, and she had this calm energy that made everybody around her feel underdressed intellectually. She'd spent decades consulting on protected tree cases all over the state, and the first thing she said after stepping onto my lawn was, "That oak is magnificent." Immediately, I liked her. She spent nearly 3 hours examining the tree, measuring roots, checking soil compaction, studying the grading around the construction site. At one point, she crouched near the trench silently for so long I started getting nervous. Finally, she stood up, brushed dirt off her jeans, and sighed. "This is worse than I expected." My stomach dropped. She explained that the roots Ethan wanted removed were major stabilization roots, critical to the structural integrity of the tree. Removing them could weaken the oak enough to make it unstable during storms, maybe not immediately, but over time. Then she pointed toward the construction site. But honestly, she said quietly, the bigger problem is what they've already done. Turns out the excavation and aggressive grading had already damaged smaller feeder roots underground. The soil around part of the tree had compacted from heavy machinery, reducing oxygen flow. Basically, the oak was already under stress, and somebody had signed off claiming minimal risk. Eleanor actually laughed when she read the other arborist's report. This thing wouldn't survive peer review in a community college class. That woman became my hero right there. Her report was brutal. 42 pages. Diagrams, route maps, photographic evidence, scientific analysis. She documented everything, including visible signs of premature canopy stress beginning on the construction-facing side of the tree. I submitted the report to the city that same week. 3 days later, Ethan's permit was revoked. I'll never forget the look on his face when the notice got taped to the construction fence. The man looked personally betrayed by reality itself. That evening, he stormed across the street toward me while I was watering my front flower beds. "You think you've won something here?" he snapped. I set the hose down slowly. "I think your contractor should have listened to the tree experts. This tree is costing me thousands of dollars." "No," I said. "Your decisions are." That hit a nerve. He stepped closer and lowered his voice. "You know what your problem is, Daniel? You've lived in this neighborhood so long you think you own it." And that one actually stung a little, because buried underneath the anger was something else: resentment. Ethan hated this neighborhood. He hated the old homes, the regulations, the trees, probably even the people. He wanted a clean slate where money automatically got him his way, and this old oak standing in front of my house represented every inconvenient thing he couldn't control. A week later, I got a letter from his attorney. They were officially threatening legal action. According to them, my tree constituted a private nuisance causing construction delays, financial damages, and property interference. If I refused to remedy the situation, they intended to sue. I remember sitting at my kitchen table reading that letter while rain tapped against the windows and thinking, this has gotten completely insane. So I hired my own lawyer. Her name was Carla Jennings, and during our first meeting she read the complaint twice, leaned back in her chair, and smiled. Not a nervous smile either. The kind of smile surgeons probably make before difficult operations. Then she said, "I think your neighbors may have just made a very expensive mistake." Once Carla got involved, the entire tone of the situation changed. Up until then, Ethan had been acting like this was some annoying neighborhood dispute he could bully his way through with paperwork and pressure, but Carla treated it like a full-scale liability case from day one. She didn't rant, didn't posture, didn't send dramatic threats. She just started quietly collecting evidence, and honestly, watching her work was a little terrifying. The first real crack in Ethan's story came during discovery. His entire lawsuit depended on one argument: that the tree problem was unexpected and that I'd knowingly refused to address a hazard damaging his property. Simple enough on paper. Except it wasn't true. Because buried inside a stack of contractor emails and planning documents was a conversation from nearly 8 months earlier, before construction even began. Luis, the contractor, had warned Ethan in writing that the planned driveway route would interfere with the oak's root zone. He even included alternative layouts, one of which curved slightly around the protected area. More expensive, obviously, but safer. Ethan rejected it almost immediately. One email literally said, "We're not redesigning the whole driveway over a damn tree." When Carla read that line out loud in her office, she just looked over at me slowly and said, "Well, that's going to age poorly." And somehow it got worse for them. Turns out the construction crew had already performed unauthorized trenching inside the protected root zone before any permits were approved. Eleanor documented evidence of cut feeder roots and soil disruption that predated the city authorization process entirely. In plain English, they'd already damaged the tree before they even threatened me. That changed everything, because now this wasn't just about property inconvenience anymore. It became potential negligence involving a protected heritage tree, unpermitted excavation, and knowingly ignoring environmental recommendations. Carla filed a counterclaim so fast it made my head spin. And attached to that filing was something Ethan definitely didn't expect: an assessed replacement valuation for the oak. $84,000. Apparently, when you calculate age, ecological value, canopy size, environmental contribution, and restoration costs for a protected heritage white oak, the number gets very large very quickly. I still remember Ethan's reaction because I accidentally witnessed it. A process server delivered the paperwork while I was outside checking my mail, and about 10 minutes later, I heard shouting from across the street. Not arguing, full-blown meltdown yelling. Vanessa kept saying, "Lower your voice." And Ethan shouted back, "Over a tree? They want $84,000 over a tree." I'd be lying if I said that didn't feel a little satisfying. But weirdly enough, around that time I also started feeling sad. Because the whole neighborhood had changed. People whispered outside during evening walks. Construction workers avoided eye contact. The Callaways stopped speaking to basically everyone. And every morning I'd sit on my porch drinking coffee looking at this giant, beautiful oak caught in the middle of two people's pride. One afternoon, Luis walked over while his crew was packing equipment into a trailer. He looked exhausted. I tried warning him, he muttered quietly. About all of it. I nodded. He ever listen? Luis laughed under his breath. Rich people only love experts when experts agree with them. That line stuck with me. The preliminary hearing happened in late October, and honestly, it felt less like a trial and more like watching reality slowly corner somebody. Ethan came in overly confident, expensive suit, giant binder, acting like he was about to dismantle my entire case. Then Eleanor testified, and man, she was incredible, calm, precise, unshakable. She explained root systems, structural stabilization, soil compaction, long-term canopy stress, all in this measured tone that somehow made Ethan's entire argument sound childish. Then Carla introduced the contractor emails. The courtroom got very quiet after that, especially when the judge started flipping through the timeline, showing unauthorized excavation had already occurred before permit approval. At one point, the judge literally removed his glasses and asked Ethan's attorney, "Your clients proceeded with excavation after being warned about the protected root zone?" Not angry. Just disappointed. Honestly worse. The attorney tried pivoting toward property hardship and financial damages, but the momentum was gone by then. The facts were ugly. They knew about the roots. They ignored recommendations. They cut corners anyway. And now they wanted somebody else to pay for the consequences. Near the end of the hearing, the judge looked over both legal teams and basically suggested settlement before the case escalated further. Which was judge language for, "You really do not want me officially ruling on this." 3 days later, the Callaways folded. They dropped the lawsuit completely. In return, I agreed not to pursue full financial damages if they redesigned the driveway in compliance with the city's recommendations and paid for proper arborist supervision moving forward. So after months of chaos, guess what finally got built? A curved driveway, exactly like the original contractor recommended in the first place. Cost them almost $9,000 extra too. And the irony? It actually looked better. Seriously, the curve wrapped naturally around the oak, gave the front yard more character, and made the whole property look less like a suburban office park. Even a couple neighbors admitted it improved the house. But karma still wasn't done with Ethan. A city inspection later uncovered additional code violations tied to the earlier grading work and drainage modifications. Improper runoff control, unauthorized excavation depth, missing documentation. The whole thing snowballed into fines, stop work orders, and nearly 3 more months of delays. By the time construction finally finished, rumor around the neighborhood was they'd lost close to 30 grand cleaning up problems they could have avoided from the beginning. And the craziest part? The oak survived. Barely stressed now, healthy canopy, stronger than ever. Sometimes I still sit on the porch in the evenings watching the wind move through those branches, and I think about how weird people can get when money mixes with pride. Because truthfully, this whole thing was never really about roots or concrete or permits. Ethan couldn't stand the idea that something older than him, something he couldn't control or outspend, got in the way of what he wanted. And honestly, I think that bothered him more than losing the lawsuit. The Callaways still live there, by the way. We don't talk. But every single morning when Ethan backs his car down that expensive curved driveway, he has to steer around the exact tree he tried so hard to destroy. And if I'm being honest, that feels like the perfect ending. Or maybe not. Because some people in the neighborhood still think I should have just let them cut the roots and avoid all the drama. Others think I should have sued them for every dollar possible after what they did to the tree. So now I'm curious what you think. Was I protecting something important, or was I just another stubborn neighbor making things worse? Let me know down in the comments. And if you enjoy real stories about neighborhood drama, legal revenge, and people learning expensive lessons the hard way, hit like, subscribe, and stick around for the next one.